Good morning. Good morning. This is the Second Opinion Sports Medicine Podcast, the Sports Medicine Podcast. We're the pro sports doctors. I'm Dr. Dhokal.
I'm Dr. Glass. Good morning.
Good morning, my friend. How are you this week?
Doing well, man. It's bright and early. What day is it? Wednesday? We normally don't do it on a Wednesday. This is good.
Yeah, midweek. It's a good way to get over the hump of the week for sure. We had a lot of stuff go on this weekend with the NFL and, in the world in general as far as health. So I'm excited to talk to you about a few things that popped up in the last week.
Yeah, let's get into it. Hopefully, I'm for our viewers. I'm doing a little new mic situation here. I'm holding my mic to see if we get a better clarity in the sound. But so hopefully this goes well on your end too.
Yeah, no,
it doesn't cut in and out. I don't know, but we'll see.
No, you're loud and clear. I like it.
Perfect.
So let me just ask you right off the top. There was quite a few injuries to some major players this last week. Is there one in particular that jumps out that you're like, man, this was terrible for that team?
No, let's roll with your
Okay.
Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch any games this weekend. I was on the field with my daughter, and so didn't get to see any games. Got to see some of the highlights, but no real injury report on any particular.
Well,
read the injury reports, but didn't see any.
Yeah. Well, I know we had discussed a couple key injuries in the last few days. So in no particular order, since Travis Kelce's been in the news in the last few weeks, we can start with him. He had an ankle injury, which initially looked kind of serious. I don't know if you saw the little instant replay, or I don't want to call it a highlight, but the film where it showed he got hurt. A lot of people thought maybe he blew his Achilles just based off initial speculation.
Yeah, I think it's in everybody's mind, right? Achilles after seeing Rodgers. So I think that's the instant little go-to. You see a guy limping off and throwing helmets down and stuff. I think him looking back on how he reacted to that, knowing that he tried to go back in that game, and then he tried, and he's reportedly going to be playing again this week. So I think it was a little over dramatization on his part.
Right. Yeah.
I think he's getting caught up in too much of the Hollywood. You would have thought he tore his Achilles based on how he reacted. He threw his helmet down. He was really frustrated, but it's one of those things. I think it's coming off his frustration of just coming off the preseason with that knee injury, right? I don't think the way he reacted was based on how painful it was or what. I think he's just pissed off that, okay, I have to go through this again. It's just, it's hard, man.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. That's not something I reflected on, Dustin, but that's a great point. He was coming off an injury. And so I think, your immediate thought is not again, and having coming off an injury, everything that it entails to get back to 100% or at least to get on the field. But that being said, I do agree with you. I feel like it was a little bit dramatic for what ended up being, hey, I'm back on the field. And then not only am I back on the field as a decoy, but I actually caught another touchdown, lo and behold,
Right.
So I don't know if that was a dupe job or what, but I'm not believing Travis Kelce and his dramatics anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm glad the whole Taylor Swift thing has kind of calmed down. And he even, that week after we talked about it, not that we had anything to do with it, but he was telling media that it needs to calm down too. But the headlines the next day, I don't know if you saw it, but it said Kelce shakes it off, so
that's hilarious.
It's pretty funny, so it's pretty funny that they couldn't get away from, doing that. So
no, that's clever. Actually, I like it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see that he was back.
And I looked it up this morning just to get a last minute, just to see where he's reported. And, they had a press conference, I think yesterday, saying that he's fighting his way back into the lineup and he should be good to go. So, so that tells us it's a low grade, low ankle sprain, and he'll be good.
I don't want to talk too much about strategy and coaching. We're a sports med show, but I will say the Chiefs somehow keep finding a way to win. You could say that they should have lost that game last week, and once again they find a way to win. And the thing that I will say is that's the difference between good teams and great teams. A lot of times things come down to one play or a call here, a call there. We could get deep into the weeds with how I think maybe the referees missed a couple things or gave the Chiefs a call or two, but hey man, you can't cry over spilt milk, and that's how it is. You just got to roll with the punches. But
Speaking
I was
about
talking with
crying, oh, sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, I mentioned to somebody that when you're a winner, you get the breaks. You
Yeah.
know, you get the calls. Jordan gets the calls. And when you're the repeating two-time world champions, you're gonna maybe get a call or two. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad nobody was seriously hurt as far as Kelce goes. But what were you gonna say about the crying?
Oh, you don't want to hear it.
Oh,
They're basically, the Kansas City's like the anti-Chargers, right? It's the
yeah,
yin and yang, right? So
yeah,
you
yeah,
got you said they just find a way to win, right? Well,
sure,
conversely, your boys find a way to lose, and it's just frustrating. I feel bad, So
yeah,
yeah, it's like the yin and yang. It's the duality of the two. It's like they're very parallel, but on
yeah.
opposite ends, right? It's just frustrating. I
Here's
feel
what I got to say. I do feel like it is a little bit of a, I hate to even say this, a little bit of a big brother, little brother situation in the
Mhm.
sense, not that they're, superior to the Chargers in any type of way. We got dogs on our team too. But I will say that sometimes you got to have that breakthrough. And I really do think when the Chargers start to knock off one or two playoff wins, or if we can, get to the Super Bowl, win the AFC championship, and maybe even win a championship one day, I think that narrative will flip with the team. It's really hard to, until you win, it's hard to be a winner. I don't know
Yeah.
how else to put it. And
Yeah.
so we have winners on our team. We just haven't won as a team. And hopefully that'll change this year or very soon. But
Yeah, I believe it's coming. Just like, we all feel that. We feel it. Because you get the players and the makeup of the team is there.
right.
It's like one little thing off. So
Yeah.
it'll come. It'll come, and like you said, I think it'll snowball, and I think there'll be a run of it for a few years, just like Kansas City's having, just
Yeah.
like the other teams that have had success multiple times.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Um, a couple other injuries to switch off the Chargers and the Chiefs here for a minute. I think the biggest injury, the biggest profile injury of the week could have been Justin Jefferson. Uh,
Hmm.
he hurt his hamstring recently. They said he's now on the IR, so he's out for 4 weeks minimum. Um, it looks like KJ Osborne might slip into his kind of X receiver role. He might slide into there pretty nicely and kind of take over for him. But that being said, you can't replace Justin Jefferson. He was probably the first pick of the draft in most people's fantasy drafts and had a tremendous year last year. He's one of the best receivers in the league. What do you think of his hamstring injury, or what do you think of the severity of it? What are your thoughts on that, him being out?
Yeah, that's a tough one for a receiver, right?
Yeah.
Hamstring, and at the high end level that he plays, of all of them at this level, you just need that. It's a big, strong muscle, and it's powerful. You need that. So I think it's a tough one to come back. I didn't see if it was high, low, but there is a difference between the two
Good
and how
point.
they respond to and how they respond to care. So I don't know if you got any information on what.
I didn't hear anything back. I didn't hear or read any information that said if it was like a higher hamstring pull or if it's a little bit lower. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
just below the glute, which
Yeah.
to me seems, we can talk about that. I've had a couple of athletes with those, and those that are higher up, like right under the gluteal fold, seem to be more serious to me
Mhm.
than something that's directly in the muscle belly. I've had
Yeah.
some medial, like middle of the muscle belly, as opposed to lateral outer part of the leg. But in general, I feel like in the middle of the muscle belly is a little easier to treat than if it's higher, more proximal underneath the gluteal fold. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that I just made up, or is that something that you've experienced too?
No, that's what I experienced too, and I agree. It's the higher one, I think, because it involves a couple things, possibly not just the hamstring attachment at that ischial tube,
Mm-hmm.
but you got the glute, like you said, the glute comes across, so you got a big, strong, powerful muscle in the glute and a big, strong muscle in the hamstring, and where the tendon comes up and attaches. If the hamstring's involved lower and the glutes are involved above, you can also influence the bursa at that ischial
Oh, good
gluteal
point.
bursa, like we've talked about before. So not only are you dealing with a possible strain, you got to get the pressure off enough to allow that bursa to calm down as well. So we are affecting the glute and the hamstring to get the pressure off that bursa. So I just think it's a little more involved than just in the belly. Those fibers are a lot more easy to grasp and cup, do all the different modalities we use to get at it. So
Yeah, just to get it to calm down, untighten, or heal if there's some tissue damage there. Yeah, I agree. A little easier area to work with and get into.
well, yeah, and then in that belly, you got one mechanism of the hamstring. When it's up higher, you got to worry about the mechanism of the glute and the hamstring.
Great
So
point.
you're clearing out a couple things there.
Yeah, I call those areas transition areas, just in the sense of a lot of times, I'm looking. You've mentioned it before quite a few times, above and below, and that's anytime that it's in a transition area, like an Achilles or bottom of the ankle, a heel. I'm looking at the calf and not just right at that site of discomfort. And I think that's the same with the high hammy, where there's multiple, structures involved there.
Yes.
You think when he comes back off 4 weeks off the IR, that's sufficient time to be 100%, or do you think he's going to come back 5 weeks down the road and still have to kind of be managing it and be a little bit careful, or do you think he's going to be, hey, I can open it up and just go 0 to 100?
Yeah, I think he's gonna feel a lot better and strong with the movement. I think, but that actual push off and that cutting motion is going to be a different thing. So he's going to be able to do a lot of linear stuff early on, 3-4 weeks in.
Sure.
But then to really get game ready, I think it's more 5, 6, 7 weeks, to be honest, to really feel back to himself, because
Yeah.
it's not only just getting the pain down and getting the inflammation down and getting that range of motion back with normal walking. Because even when you hurt your hamstring, just driving hurts,
Yeah.
just that motion, the walking, stairs, so that takes a couple weeks typically to calm that down. So just to get normal function of activities of daily living back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll be able to get that down in a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, but then you got to start increasing that
Density or something.
yeah, stretching it out a little with motion, and
Mm-hmm.
then you got to then translate it into figure eights, cutting, 90 degrees, 45 degrees, and so there's a progression of that. And typically with that, we're not allowing them to progress until they can accomplish the first one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna slowly progress it and make sure they're passing each level
So there's
before
a
ready.
bit of a checklist, like a progression list that you would go through as a clinician, or if that was your client, where you would say, okay, let's make sure we can do A before we move on to B.
Yeah, and we typically started, okay, we're gonna go, do a 30-yard, jog at 50%.
Mm-hmm.
Do that, and you need to be able to do that for about 3 days, no problem, or 3 workouts, no problem, with, multiple reps of that 30-yard at 50%, right? Because we
Yep.
don't want a one-off, "Oh, it feels good, doc," and then the next day, he didn't sleep as well or he's stressed, and then so I usually say, "Hey, we need about 3 consecutive workouts of that same motion, and then we'll ramp it up. Instead of going farther distance, we'll go to 75% for a few days, then 90%, then it's full speed at that 30, and then we'll length it out to 40, 50 yards, depending on the position and stuff like that. Linemen's not doing that, right? They're doing smaller distances, and then we'll back it off. If once they're at 100% of that, jog to a sprint, then we'll typically go to like a 45-degree cut at both ways at that same 50%, then 75, then 100, right? And then we'll go from 45s, we'll do 90 cuts, and do the same progression. And then we'll go to a big 20-yard figure eight type thing, right? Both ways. And then we'll bring it down to like an 8-yard figure eight, right? So
Tightening it.
yep, tightening it up. So there's a lot of progression. We do the same thing. Well, I typically do the same thing from an ankle standpoint. Ankle and hamstring, I basically do that kind of progression comes from an ankle rehab
Mm-hmm.
protocol. that I learned a long time ago, but it works really well for the hamstring too. So
Sure.
hamstring, anything, ankle, knee, hip, all that, and everything in between. We kind of use the same protocol to get, because if we can accomplish all those, even if they're having some tightness and some pain, we can know that they're strong and stable enough to be game ready. So it's not just, it's more based on a functional protocol versus a pain protocol.
Man, that's well put. I'm glad that you put a period on that statement with that, because these guys are high level athletes, so it's not about discomfort, it's about function,
Mhm.
and so I think you hit the nail on the head with that. And I really like the progression, because anyone listening can visualize that progression about, okay, if you can do this, then we can move on to this next thing that is going to be a little more stressful on that injured structure. And if it can maintain and hold that without having a regression, then that's positive, and okay, maybe that's a green light to move on.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really interesting. In my experience with it, a player could feel 100%. You could go through that whole progression and you could be, okay, green light, go. You don't have anything to worry about as far as in the back of your mind. You got to kind of tone it down a little bit, or maybe go at 90% versus 100% when you cut in versus cut out. These nuances depending on what leg the injury is on. Um, you could be 100%, hey, everything's good. And that first game back, maybe the figure eights are good, the sprints are good, but the first time you jump up, it could, and not that you don't test that beforehand, but nothing replicates game speed, nothing replicates you're going up and somebody's holding on to you, these types of things. And so anytime my athletes have a hamstring injury, I got to be honest, I'm a little bit concerned for the rest of the season, because you just
Mhm.
don't know what week that thing could go again.
Right.
It's like a repeatable injury. Maybe I'm not articulating it great, but it's one of those things that I'm always concerned. Man, that thing feels strong, looks strong, but any given moment it could really go again.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's one of those repeatable things. I think that's because what you said earlier is that it feels good. Like I feel good. I'm good to go, but
Yeah.
it hasn't been game tested and the integrity's not always there, right? So that's what I tell a lot of my patients. I try to use the analogy of like if I go outside and kick your car door in, right? On your driver's side, kick the car door in, and then we bring dent masters out and have them fix it and make it look all pretty. And you look at both sides, they look totally fine and equal, but I
Mm-hmm.
lean on the good side versus I lean on the old dented side. The dented side is going to foil easier than
Sure.
it's just based on integrity and the material makeup at that point. Once it's been kind of
Compromised.
compromised, it's going to be more susceptible. So we got to be really careful. And like you said, I just think people, I think they rush the return to, because once they return,
Mm-hmm.
we're done with the protocols. It's good. They
Yeah.
don't follow it like, okay, we return. If it's done in a perfect world, in a right world, we're going to continue that rehab, like the ankles, right?
Yeah.
Once you're done with your protocol, then nobody does anything for the ankles typically the rest of the season. Now, some of the veterans, they might stay on their wobble boards and their,
Mm-hmm.
proprioception type stuff. But a lot of the guys are like, oh, I'm done. I don't want to deal with it. And then we see it happen again,
Yeah.
and that's why we see sometimes things happen season after season after season, right?
Yeah, that's frustrating, because in my mind, you have the whole off season to really get that right. Whereas during season, sometimes you're just trying to maintain it and be like, hey, I need to be ready to go for week 5, and I need to be out there for week 6. And maybe the athlete knows they're not 100%. I'd venture to guess, 5 weeks in, most athletes have a little something going on, a little nick, a bruise, something, that is bothering them. So yeah, it'd be interesting. We'll keep an eye on Justin Jefferson and how his rehab goes. Being on the IR, he's out for 4 weeks guaranteed, and in slides KJ Osborne. So we'll see how he is able to fill those big shoes of one of the best receivers in the league in Justin Jefferson.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully it's a good recovery and everything goes his way. Speaking of return injuries
Mm-hmm.
season after season, I forget who it was. Do you remember who we're seeing the same Oh, now it's slipping my mind. You probably have it off the tip of your mind. Go ahead. I think you're
Injury wise, or you mean kind of like a fantasy
yeah,
implication?
kind of a fantasy type thing.
Got you. The
Uh
other person besides, well, we talked about KJ Osborne taking the place of Justin Jefferson because Jefferson's a hamstring injury. Something we haven't mentioned is the Arizona running back, James Conner. He went out this last week with a knee injury. So, what's interesting about Conner is this is, I think, his sixth season in the league, if I'm not mistaken. And he
mhm.
hasn't had one season where he's played the full season.
Yeah.
And look, it's a running back position. So I think that's one of the toughest positions in all of football. They take such a beating. In fact, I think it's the only position that doesn't have rules that protect them. The quarterback has rules, the receiver has rules, can't
Yeah.
hit them at certain times, certain positions. The running back, it's fair game, tee off any direction,
Mhm.
anybody. So it's a very, very difficult position, but it bums me out that this is his sixth year in a row that he's injured. As far as fantasy implications go, his backup, pretty interesting story. His name is Amari DeMarco, and he got his first career touchdown last week, Dustin.
Oh, very
So
cool.
he came
That's
in as a sub, and I think what a cool moment, especially since he is an undrafted rookie. He's out of TCU, uh, and yeah, I have a little more love for the undrafted guys. They obviously don't get drafted; they get signed for less money. No one's expecting him to do anything.
right.
Austin Eckler's an undrafted free agent.
Yep.
Jaleel Adai, who's going to be a guest on our podcast, played 9 years in the league of safety, was undrafted. So half the league is undrafted.
Right.
I got a lot of love for him, but yeah, James Conner with the knee injury, Amari DeMarco is going to slide into his uh, running back position. He'll get his first career start this next week. So exciting time for the young rookie.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. Love those stories. They have a little harder road to go than some of these other ones, and sometimes it doesn't seem fair when you're in that moment being drafted and you work so hard just like everybody else, and it's like, man, I just need my break.
Yeah,
Well, they have to earn their break a little differently, and when they get it, it's awesome to see them succeed.
yeah. You know, that reminds me of something I said to somebody this week, which was sometimes we look forward to a goal and we think of that as the end when really that's the beginning. And
Mhm.
I look at the draft that way too. We can talk about some examples specifically about what I was speaking of, but a lot of times I think you're in high school, college, your goal if you're in high school is to play in college. If you're in college, the goal is to play in the pros. And that becomes the finite finish line. When in reality, as you and I know, once you're in the league, whatever league that is, the journey is really just beginning.
Mhm.
It's like you're starting high school again, you're starting college again, you're back to being a freshman, back to being a rookie. It's all fresh and all new.
Yeah.
So I think anybody who takes the mindset of, oh, I've made it, probably not going to stick around very long.
Right. Exactly.
So it's an exciting time for Amari DeMarco. I hope he, does well. It's unfortunate it comes at the expense of James Conner's knee injury, but that's the league. I guess that's why they say next man up.
Yep.
Um, did you notice there were a couple quarterback injuries this week also, Dustin?
Let's see. Richardson, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
That
was a
was the
big one.
main one.
Yeah,
Um,
that was the big one. Go
what are,
ahead, you can speak on it.
yeah, I was just gonna say, what are your thoughts on his AC joint injury? We've talked about an AC joint injury. Actually, just last week we were talking about
Right.
Anthony Richardson, and you brought up the body blade. The other quarterback I was thinking of was the Giants quarterback Daniel Jones. He had a neck injury. I didn't really dig up too much about him, other than the coach was saying it's kind of week to week, and they thought maybe he could play this upcoming week.
So this
Uh,
is what I got on that. So I looked some stuff up on that, and because I especially next, I always want to, with what we do,
yeah.
non-orth, it's not a traditional orthopedic. But here's the thing with Daniel Jones. And he's been sacked 28 times this season.
Oh my goodness.
No, listen to this: 16 in the last 2 games, bro. He had surgery in 2021 on his neck after missing the final 6 games due to an injury.
You know
So,
what? I forgot
yeah,
about that.
yeah. So 28 sacks. So you gotta, man, this offensive line, I don't know, man, but those numbers alone, something's getting missed.
Yeah.
16, a quarterback cannot take that many hits. Not even a quarterback, anybody
Buddy.
taking
Yeah.
that many hits, so
Yeah, that's brutal.
he's lucky that's all he has. No.
Yeah, and he's not really known as a shifty quarterback. He's not
Hmm.
known as someone who's going to slide out of the pocket and escape trouble or create. I kind of look at him more as a pocket quarterback. Some people might disagree with that, but yeah, I don't think of Daniel Jones as being a speedster, and so
Right.
that makes him susceptible if you're going to be hanging out in the pocket.
Right.
If your O line has weaknesses, I haven't looked up to see if they're missing a starter or what's going on, or if they're just getting hammered. But
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say my follow up to that. You can't, being an O lineman myself, you can't blame it all on the O line because depending on the type of quarterback, right? That might just be his type of game too, where he's going to say, "Hey, I'm going to take my lumps, but that's because this is how I'm going to play. I'm going to stay in the pocket as long as I can, wait for things to happen, and then
yeah,
I'm going to let it go." So if you know that, you're more susceptible to taking those hits
sure,
because it's a timing thing. I mean,
sure. Now,
so
if you were a team owner, let me put you in different shoes here. You're a team owner, you're a general manager, you're a head coach, and say you have both these quarterbacks on the same team. Anthony Richardson with an AC joint, you have Daniel Jones with a neck injury. Assuming they're the same type of player, right? Like they can both make the throws, they're just as mobile. Which injury are you more concerned with playing your quarterback? Like who are you putting in if those are your two choices?
yeah, the AC. So you got to look at it two different ways, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing: from a game standpoint and a success for your team standpoint, you want to you the shoulder is going to be more impactful, right? The AC joint's going to be more impactful for that game time situation. It's going to affect his throwing.
Throwing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but from a human side and from a after life after the game side, the neck injury is way more. I'm keeping him
Concerning.
out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. It's interesting because if it's like a whiplash, a soft tissue issue only, that to me is a little bit different. Although I'm still concerned, you take one hit from the side or from the blind side from the back, and you can really turn a sprain strain issue into something more. If that neck injury is like, a disc bulge, or you're having some radicular symptoms, even though it's not a bulge, then, I'm definitely a little more concerned. And at that position, yeah, I'd feel better maybe with the neck sprain in a different position than in the quarterback position.
right. Well, and having any kind of neck immobility issues, your concussion rate is going to go up higher too.
Great point.
You're going to be more susceptible to taking a hit onto the ground or a normal hit that typically would not cause a concussion or any kind of head issue. When your neck cannot withstand that same amount of force
Mm-hmm.
because of the immobility, it's gonna be translated into the brain easier. And
That's a great point too.
so
Yeah, well, it's things to watch out for in this upcoming week. If Anthony Richardson, like I said, he's on the IR, he's not playing for a few weeks. Daniel Jones seems to be more of a day-to-day, week-to-week type thing. So we'll keep an eye on him if he plays this week. I'd be interested to see one, how he plays, what his mechanics are, how he's moving, how he looks, and then also interested to see how he is after the game. Does he take on another 8 sacks? In a game, or whatever his average is. I'm trying to think who else was getting really hammered like that in years past. There's somebody that I'm thinking of that I can't recall that was just getting brutal,
right.
literally hit every single week. It'll come to me later, I'm
I want
sure.
to say it's like a breeze or
Yeah,
something, smaller guy, but scrappy, but he would get up every time.
just taking the hits,
Yeah.
huh? Yeah.
I don't know if that's who it was, but
That wasn't who I was thinking of in particular, but yeah, maybe it'll come to me later. It's not an uncommon thing in the league if you
yeah.
don't have the best team where the quarterback becomes a little bit of the sacrificial lamb, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think those are the kind of the four big injuries of the week with Travis Kelce, Justin Jefferson, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, James Conner with his knee injury. He's out for a few weeks. Um, there were a couple others that are worth mentioning. If you don't mind, I'd be curious to see if you heard anything about these guys. One gentleman's name is CJ Godwin. He's a special teamer on the Cowboys. He tore his pec muscle, out for the year. Major injury, right? That's not something that's a 3 week or 6 week. Like, you're having surgery most likely, and you're spending the whole year rehabbing. So hopefully he's back
Yeah.
at the beginning of next year. Do you have any experience with any torn pecs?
Yeah. Well, pecs and bicep, they kind of come together. A lot of times when people come in with, we have to evaluate, is it the pec or is it the bicep tendon or is it the bicep belly? So I've had a number of patients come in with both. They're very painful for the most part. Usually they're done from a forceful movement. Most of mine have been coming from bodybuilders
Mhm.
type motions. They're loading it up more than they should. That's where I've seen a lot of them. But yeah, painful. You got that deformity, and then they got to, I always refer them out to the ortho, say, hey, you got to go get this evaluated to see if at this point it's just cosmetic or it's going to screw up your function. How bad? Do you need the surgery? Do you not need the surgery? Can we rehab it? Because a lot of times, if it's still functional and we can manage around it and do our tissue work and they get full function, they might still have that little deformity because of the muscle indentation, and
Mhm.
they'd be fine with it. That's, then it's on them.
Sure.
But if they can't function and use that arm, then you should have the surgery, obviously.
You know what bums me out about that is he's a special teamer, and as you know, being on special teams, you're part of one of the three major groups on the team: offense, defense, special teams. But I would say special teamers typically have a hard time holding on with the team for a long period of time.
Right.
Um, People like Daryl Stuckey, I think of, he was on the Chargers and was a Pro Bowler on special teams and made his living there. And so there are some guys that really make a career out of it. I hope CJ Godwin is able to make a healthy recovery, a successful return. Really rooting for the kid.
Yeah.
Didn't really know too much about him. Was happy to see that the Niners kind of slapped around the Cowboys last week. Um, actually the Chargers play them on Monday night here coming up in a few days. And an interesting stat on that, don't quote me on this, but I think last year teams that played the 49ers were like 0 for 10 or something like that the week after.
Oh, wow.
Maybe it was like 2 and 12 or something, but the stats were definitely like, you play the Niners the week before, you get beat up, and the week after you're taking an L.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So I hope that's the case this week. I hope the Cowboys are a little beat up coming into SoFi for Monday Night Football this week. We'll see. Cowboy Nation rides hard, and I'm sure they'll have a lot of fans. And they're coming off kind of an embarrassing loss, to be quite honest. So sometimes when you get embarrassed on national TV, you rebound. So I'm curious to see what kind of team shows up: a team that got beat up or a team that's demoralized and pissed off and ready to, play pridefully.
Yeah. You
What's
hope it's
your
you
just quick
hope it's
thought
the
on that?
latter. Yeah, I think it's early enough in the season where they come back pissed off and ready to fight.
Yeah,
I think in a few more weeks you'll start seeing guys with their tail between their legs and head
mm,
down. It's just
yeah,
hard, when
it's
you're
hard.
when you're getting beat up and you're losing, to know that you have like 3 or 4 more weeks of this and it really does not matter because you're not making the playoff. Then you
Sure.
start seeing the things change.
Yeah,
But sometimes on the flip side of that, they say, okay, let's play for one game, right?
yeah,
And let's have pride. Like, let's not go
sure,
out like chumps.
sure. No,
So
that's a great point, Dustin, because somewhere around the midway part of the season or the 10 game mark, for some teams it's written on the wall, like, okay, we're 2-8, we're not doing anything this year.
right.
And then if you're a player, you might start thinking, well, why am I sacrificing my body and putting my livelihood on the line? Like, I'm playing hard, but I'm not playing like we're trying to make the playoffs and win the Super Bowl.
Right.
I think you do get some tapering off. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. That's a great point. I didn't
Yeah.
really quite think of that.
It's fun to look at that and also then go, okay, well, who's on a contract year? Who's, because then
Yes.
that plays into it. Like you just
Yeah.
said, like, but if you're on the bubble and you still have many years left in this league, then you are going full speed, right?
Yep.
Because now you're just playing for a spot next year. You're not
Yes.
playing. So,
Yeah. You're a
so it's
special
fun. And
teamer.
then you
You're
got the
going hard.
veteran that's like, man, I got 2 more seasons. I just want to, collect my paycheck and
Yeah.
enjoy the game and go out on my terms, then that's a different play, right?
I wonder if the casual fan thinks of it like that, because being on the sports med side, obviously we're talking injuries, we're talking longevity, we're talking availability. So those are things that we think of. But yeah, that matters, man. You're a 10-year wide receiver. You might just be like, let me get year 11 in
Mhm.
injury free. You're a special teamer that's on a contract year. You might be like, let me go balls to the wall and
Yeah.
put something on
Yeah.
tape, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, a couple other injuries, Dustin, if you don't mind me bringing them up. One is a Jets offensive lineman. And I know you like all the O linemen, so I'll
Yeah.
bring this injury up. His name's Elijah Vera Tucker. Big guy. Man, I'm bummed out for this guy too, and the reason is last year he had a season-ending injury where he tore his triceps. And last year he tore his triceps playing Denver, out for the year. This year they play Denver, and he tears his Achilles tendon, out for the year. So that's a bummer for him, and I wonder what his mindset's going to be the third time that they play Denver. Any insight on that, as far as being superstitious, or as far as just having two back-to-back season-ending injuries? That's tough physically, but man, I think that's so tough mentally.
Yeah. Well, I don't were both of them in Denver or just against Denver?
Against
Because
Denver, I don't know if it was both in
yeah,
Denver, because
'cause
now you're thinking
yeah,
altitude and things
altitude,
like
yeah.
that.
So he just doesn't do good, but or he's got a blue and orange aversion,
Yeah,
something
yeah, right.
yeah, that just sucks. And that was one of the I was trying to recall the back-to-back season type thing, right? I was trying to think of it earlier. I know
Yeah,
we had talked about a couple players that had back-to-back years where it was just kind of brutal. But this one with Denver, that's unfortunate. That starts playing with a guy's head. I know
yeah,
that.
absolutely. It'd
Yeah.
be motivation. If the Jets play Denver next year, I might circle that and be like, this game, I'm
Yeah.
gonna really come with it. But yeah, bum
Or
me
I
out.
sit out or I sit out or ask for a bye week.
Right. Yeah,
Like,
take that as a
yeah,
personal day,
yeah,
huh?
yeah, exactly.
Like, hey, coach, I don't want to go 3 for 3 on this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it bummed me out. So, any of those season-ending injuries are just tough. I hate to see that. It's just brutal for the individual, and tough on the team. Look, the Jets offensive line is one of the worst offensive lines in the league. We saw what happened with, Aaron Rodgers the first game of the season. Zach Wilson's in there, and I've seen several plays where the O line just looked confused. And if you don't have that continuity, I think that can happen. So I think that's a big loss for the Jets. The O linemen don't get very much credit, but man, they are what make everything tick
Mhm.
on the offensive side. So
Yeah.
um, the last guy to bring up that I thought was unfortunate, kind of along the same lines, man. It's really ironic. Uh, Cornerback Emmanuel Mosley, he plays for Detroit. And his first game back, he tore his left ACL in week 5 last year. Um, this year, I should say, he tore his left ACL in week 5 last year. His first game back this year, he now tore his right ACL. So left ACL tear, puts in a year of work, rehabs it, gets back to the point of being an NFL starting cornerback. And first game back, now he tears his other ACL. So quick thoughts. Super coincidental that it's the same injury, different knee, or do you think there's some compensation stuff going on? I mean, we haven't delve too deep into him. I'm just
Yeah.
bringing him up as a surface topic. But what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah. Was it week 5 again? 2
Yes.
back-to-back seasons, week 5.
Yes.
So there you go. Next year you're taking week 5 off.
Right.
You know, but
Yes.
no, I think, man, this is where I would say there's something, the power of psychology at this point, right? Because
Mhm, mhm.
that's not, to me, that's not an anatomical or mechanical thing at that point. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm kind of getting weird out there, but I'm just, there's something more to it. Because what are the chances,
Yeah.
of both ACLs and then have it happen just like that? Yeah, the compensation, but when you're a year into it, before he even entered that game, he's well tested. I mean, he's not game tested, but practice tested.
Sure.
I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure they let him go a couple practices to take some good hits. Like, you're not just gonna protect a guy typically leading into the first time coming back. You're gonna say, okay, if you're ready to get back, we got to see how you do in the practice, and we're gonna let the guys tee off on you. You got to come across, so just to get game ready, right? So I don't know, man. I just think
It's unfortunate,
something's
right?
in the cosmos. I think I'm very into the psychology of sports and things. And I think if all he was thinking about was his ACL, 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 don't tear it, don't tear it, don't tear it.
Sure.
It's just like going up to bat. Don't strike out, don't strike out, don't strike out. What are you gonna do? You strike out. That's all you put into it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is what happened to the guy, but and we'll never know, but I just feel like there's a part to it.
Yeah, just a unfortunate
Yeah.
coincidence, if nothing else,
Yeah.
these little kind of nuances about like, Elijah Vera Tucker getting hurt in Denver 2 times in a row or tearing your opposite ACL both on week 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's slightly interesting, more unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, bums me out for them.
Yeah. There's no way I mean, there's been psychology tests and stuff on the power of suggestion, and there's been so many, stories about that. Um, Whether people believe in it or not, it's, if you're not 100% sure, you might as well err on the side of caution and just be super positive and have your mind right and mindset. That's my whole point of that. So
No, I
I
think
really
that's
work on athletes on that, and returning is like, we talk about that because it's important, because whether it has a factor or not, it doesn't hurt to do it.
I think that's a great point, man. I think your mindset is so important in anything that you do. Um, we've talked about this before. I'm a big believer that your body, I don't even know if a believer is the right word, but I really strongly believe that your body listens to your thoughts,
Hmm.
even not your spoken word, but even just your thoughts.
Hmm.
I could be thinking about something delicious to eat, and it creates a whole cascade of,
Yep.
you know, chemical changes in my body. Just like if I see my wife looking
Hmm.
super beautiful, it
Hmm.
creates a whole different range of
Yeah.
chemical
Yep.
changes. And
Yeah.
so I think your thoughts are powerful. And I think if you're concerned about something, always worried about something, that's where that thing comes in, where it's like, well, that's in the back of your mind.
Right.
Um, I think, like you said, the opposite's true, where you can really positively reinforce yourself and kind of create a super belief.
Hmm.
Um, you think Deion Sanders has doubt in his mind, or do you think Deion Sanders is like always positive? I'm going to get this done. There's a difference in a mindset of
Yeah.
doubt versus confidence. And
Right.
I think that's powerful, man. I think that's why maybe a lot of your athletes resonate with you, because you have that mindset. And during dark times, you can kind of shed some light and be like, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel here. Let's stay positive. That's
Correct.
important as a clinician, just as important as knowing your orthopedic test, I
Hmm.
think,
Yes, I agree, and
especially
I think
working
that's
with
what
athletes.
separates us over these years. It's not just having, it's not just empathizing with them, but also giving them that, hey, and this is a conversation I just had yesterday with one of my patients, because they're in a dark time right now, and I was saying, listen, it's really easy for me to stay confident and calm during this time,
Yeah.
because I've done this for 20 years, and I'm fortunate and unfortunate enough to see these cases through. Meaning, like, I hate seeing people in pain and hate seeing them like this, but
Sure.
I also have the perspective of I see how you start and I know where it's going to finish. So it's real easy for me to say, stay calm, stay collected. You will get through it. Where when you're in the heat of the battle and you're living with it 24/7, it's understandable that it's hard to see that light at the end of the tunnel, like you said. So I think it's nice that we have that perspective and are able to help guide patients through that process.
Yeah. Guide's a great word. I look at you as a mentor to a young athlete or a professional athlete, doesn't even have to be young, in that having that experience, like you said, I think that's so well put. Having seen people go from here to here, start to end, and navigate that journey with them. Look, the athlete has to make that walk themselves. They're the ones injured, they're the ones doing all the hard work. However, if you got to do a hike up a tall hill, what makes it better is doing it with somebody.
Hmm.
And I think as clinicians, as people who treat athletes, that's an important aspect that's often overlooked. Like you can do the physical um, things, the movements, the weightlifting, the preventative stuff. But since we spend so much quality time with these athletes, I think there's a great opportunity to also talk them up a little bit, raise their confidence, share our experience with them, let them know that they're not alone, or that, people have gone through this and have had success and you've seen it and you've helped them with it. So they should have confidence in what you're telling them to do.
Right.
Um, yeah, that's awesome, man. That's
Yeah.
great. I feel like we've had a lot of negativity in today's podcast as far as players and
Yeah.
injuries. So I want to talk on some positive points if you're into that.
Yeah. Let's do it. You know me.
Yeah. So Austin Eckler, Chargers running back, he's been out since week 1. He had an ankle injury, kind of week to week. I suspect it was maybe a little more serious than they let on, and he's been out for 4 weeks now, 5 weeks if you include the bye. And he's coming back week 6. He said he's 99% certain he's coming back. So we talk a lot about people who are injured and off the field. This is one time we can talk about somebody who's returning to play. So I'm excited to see him and see what his movement is and how he feels. I think he might have been able to go 2 weeks ago, but we had the bye week this week, and so they kind of erred on the side of caution.
Awesome.
But hopefully he's good for the rest of the year. That's a highlight. That's a bright point for him.
Yeah. Yeah, let me ask you this. You brought it up. So a guy makes a quote of saying, "I'm 99% sure I'm coming back." What do you?
Mhm.
And this is why I always ask my patients, because I'll ask them, "Hey, what percent do you think you're at this week?" Right?
Yeah.
Because I really don't talk about pain too much, because as you and me know, pain is a function. It's there due to a loss of function, right? So I'm more concerned about how are we functioning versus how are you feeling, right?
Correct.
It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I don't care how you're feeling, but I want to know what percent you feel like you can perform at. So, anyways, so I ask them what percent, and then if they say, "Oh, I'm at 60%," okay, or 80%, okay, what's that last 20%? I don't care about that 80% because that's the good stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's that 20% holding you back? What are you not able to do that you wish you could? And if we can accomplish that, what would be so? Bring that full circle. What do you think that 1% for him? Because that's like a sliver. Like, what do you
Yeah.
think that is?
I think that's coaching. I think that's I don't want to say anything and
Yep.
get in trouble with coach. I
Yeah.
think that's what
Right.
that is.
I think you're
Uh,
exactly right.
I think he's like, hey, if I get the green light from coach, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
But I don't want to speak on it. That's coach's job.
Yeah.
That's how I read that.
Me too.
Um,
I agree with you. I think he's covering his ass a little, giving a
yeah,
little wiggle room case that way. If he says, "Oh yeah, I'm 100%," then somebody out of his power, or out of his control, says, "No, you're not. You can't play this week," and it has nothing to do with your ability or how you're feeling. It's just we have a different game plan. And
yeah,
then the media would be like, "You said you're 100%. What's happening?" And then they blow it up, right?
yeah.
So that's.
Especially in this day of gambling, in this day of fantasy.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
I
there's
didn't
a
even think
lot
of
more
that.
people that care about Austin Eckler besides Charger fans.
Yeah, yeah,
There's fantasy people who care. There's people who are betting on the Chargers or betting on Austin. And so, yeah, it changes the dynamics a little bit. I'm excited to see him play though,
me
because
too. I like watching him.
man, he is a powerful, powerful running back.
Yeah.
Like he's one of the strongest guys I've seen, and I don't have experience working with him. I'm not speaking from personal
Yeah.
knowledge, but just being a witness. dang, that guy is a bull. Like he
It's
is,
exciting to watch. He's fun to
yeah,
watch. His
yeah,
energy's fun.
yeah. It's great. And another undrafted guy, right? So I really like stories like that. People who have success, mostly due to determination and hard work. Like I admire that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Um,
Yes. Speaking of his energy and hype, I meant to with the Justin Jefferson injury, the hamstring. Some of the things I was reading on that was not only is he going to be there were several quotes from different people
mhm.
saying the impact that's going to have on the team is that he's their hype guy. He's their guy in the locker room. He's the guy on the sideline. He's the guy that brings the energy, right?
Yeah,
So luckily they're all saying, hey, he's our guy, he's our energy guy, he's going to be there, we're not going to lose out on that. But it's a difference when you need that on the field, you need that
yeah,
energy. It's one thing to be on the sideline or for baseball in the dugout, be that, but there's a different dynamic when that same hype person is out making plays too.
yes.
So but they were all
Great point.
staying positive, being like, he's our dude, he's our guy, which I thought was cool because you don't see that much in it being reported. So we were talking about Eckler and the energy
No,
he brings and stuff,
that's a
but
great point. He's
yeah,
a little bit of the heart and soul of the team, right?
mhm,
And when you're going to battle, you want your top dogs with you. And it feels different if you're standing on the sideline at the national anthem and you're in cleats and your guys in tennis shoes.
yeah,
That feels different, you know?
yep, yep,
Um, yeah, that'll be interesting to see how they can kind of motivate themselves or up their energy without their star guy there.
yeah,
Not only is he hype guy, but he's the star of the team. So that's
yeah,
a dual role.
yeah.
Yeah, that
So
the Vikings are in a tough position, man.
yeah,
They are really, really set up to maybe with Justin Jefferson out, lose 3 or 4 more in a row, perhaps.
right,
And now all of a sudden you're looking at being 0-7, 0-8, 1-8, 1 and
yeah,
7. It's uh yeah, we'll see how that pans out.
yep.
Um, there were two kind of interesting NFL records that were set this weekend. One was by a quarterback and one was by a team, also kind of quarterback related. So I'll just speak on it, and then I'd like to see what your thoughts are. One is the Houston Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud. He set an NFL record. He had 186 consecutive passes without an interception, and that's not only an NFL record, but an NFL rookie record that hasn't been. I think Dak Prescott in 2016 had 176 consecutive passes. So CJ Stroud has 186, not 176. He surpassed Dak since 2016. I think that's significant. That's
Yeah,
4, 5, 6, 7 year record. And CJ Stroud will go into this week looking to extend that. So pretty cool for a quarterback to have that record, especially as a rookie.
yeah. No, that's really cool. And how many years, like you said, that's not easy to do. So
Yeah.
hats off to him. It's going to be probably another 6 7 years. I don't know. I think sometimes when something like that happens, especially by a young guy, the other young guys are going to be like, okay, it's doable, I'm coming after it, um so we'll see if that could be sustainable for another 6 to 10 years.
Yeah. It said he has 1,400 passing yards, no interceptions in his team's first 5 games.
No interceptions, that's huge.
Amazing, right?
To have
And
that many, yeah, have that many attempts and not have, yeah, that's pretty cool.
a lot of games, and he joins the company of Patrick Mahomes, who had 1,800 passing yards in 2019, Drew Brees, who had 1,600 and some change in 2018, and Russell Wilson, who had 1,400 in 2019. So when you're being spoken of with the likes of Patrick Mahomes, Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, that's a great start
That's
for a
awesome.
rookie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
really
good.
cool for him. I like to see his success, especially since Houston the last couple years hasn't been a super strong team for that fan base. That's exciting.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. Good for him. You mentioned Russell Wilson. I'm just going to bring that. You know, the overall tone is that he's not doing well. The last 2 seasons, but doing fantasy this weekend, I was looking at all the quarterbacks in the league. He's in the top 10 for
Yeah,
almost all categories. I
yeah,
mean, like 6, 7, 8 in all categories.
yeah.
he's
Look,
he's still, it's just the package he's part of right now is just not working, but which is unfortunate because he's getting dumped on, and your overall feeling is that he's sucking it up. But
yeah.
when it comes to quarterbacks, he's doing really well.
Yeah, look, I have some thoughts on that too. That's the position of the quarterback, right?
Mhm.
You get the blame, you get a lot of the credit too. And
Yeah.
as far as he goes positionally, he's had a better year statistically this year than he did last year.
Mhm.
And, Sean Payton would probably say that's coaching, play calling. I probably would agree to that. It's how you use your quarterback, the positions you put your players in to have success. And so he's definitely having a better year. The team isn't having a better year, you know?
Mhm.
Um, but in order for the team to have a better year, you got to have better quarterback play. And so at least that's the first step. And then you're the Broncos. So now you're in the same division as the Chiefs, Super Bowl champs. You're in the same division as the Chargers, a lot of potential. And yeah, I mean, that could be 4 losses, even if you're a good team in division. So that's tough for him for sure.
Yeah.
Another NFL record that was set was by the Miami Dolphins.
Mhm.
I think we're going to be talking about the Dolphins a lot this season. One of the records that they set was as far as total yards. And so the stat was through 5 games, Miami has over 2,500 yards of total yards of offense. And they surpassed the 2000 St. Louis Rams. You remember that team with Kurt
Mhm.
Warner?
Yeah.
What they called the greatest show on turf. Is that right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that team in 2000 had 2,527 yards. Miami Dolphins have 2,568 yards, so just barely, but they broke that through 5 games total yards in NFL history. And I don't know if you saw, but a reporter asked Mike McDaniels, like, "Hey, you guys set the NFL record through the first 5 games. Like, what are your thoughts on that?"
Yes.
Mike McDaniels goes, "Yeah, well, all off season, our goal for the season was after 5 games to lead the league in total yards, and we did it. So we accomplished our goal." So he's kind of being facetious, like, yo, we don't
Yeah.
care about
Yeah.
breaking a yard record. We're 5 weeks in. We're trying to,
Yeah.
make it to the playoffs and win
That's
the
pretty
Super
funny.
Bowl.
That's
But
pretty funny.
that's a
Yeah.
very reporter like thing. Like, hey, coach,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's funny.
like,
But
I don't give a crap about that.
yeah. Yeah. He's a I like watching him. He's a player's coach for sure.
Seems like it. Seems
Yeah.
like it. I know we're getting up against the time, but I do want to talk about one thing that I think is important health related wise,
Mhm.
Dustin. Recently, this last week, actually, California, I guess it pertains more to California, our California listeners, but there was a Food Safety Act that passed. Did you hear a little bit about it before the law passed? Because I'd like to talk about that with you.
Yeah, I did hear a little about it, and then yesterday there was more buzz on it on the radio and stuff, and wasn't able to do a total deep dive on it to get the particulars, but they've been talking about it for a couple years, getting the bill ready and everything, and proposing it. But yeah, I think I have a couple thoughts on it, but I think having traveled internationally and seeing how things are done different in other countries, we're so ass
Behind.
backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're so ass backwards on, what we should be doing for our, we're for the last 20 plus years, I think we've been, no, even more, 50 years. I think we've been part of a big experiment, right? With changing the way, the food has been, delivered to us and presented to us, and we're seeing the results of it. So many more autoimmune conditions, so many more allergies, so many more health issues that should not be, but how much are part of the chemicals being put in these foods. You know, Obviously, as chiropractors, we want to be as holistic and as, you know, um, natural as possible. There's a time and place for things, but I think it starts with what we put in our body. And if we're feeding it with a bunch of processed stuff, chemicals and stuff like that, how can we survive and thrive well?
Yeah, no, it's almost something that can make you angry if you pause on it too long,
Mhm.
because when I was growing up, I would think the government or companies would really do their best to make sure that the product that they're putting out, especially when it comes to food, is healthy and safe for you. My perception when I was younger was like, if it's on the shelf, it's been vetted, it's at least
Yeah.
healthy. Maybe it's full of sugar, it's not the best for you, but it's not going to cause you cancer. Like they
Right.
wouldn't put that on the shelf. And the reality is that's not the truth. It's profits over people. And
Yep.
that shit pisses me off, to be quite honest. It's like, it's hard to stay informed about everything that is health related that you should know about. Like
Yeah.
everyone has busy lives. Look, we're in sports medicine. And this is something that I research and read on every day, as do you. And so you happen to come across it and maybe we're a little more knowledgeable. But the average person, man, you go and buy cereal for your kid, and okay, maybe the average person knows, Cocoa Puffs isn't the best cereal.
Yeah.
But you think, okay, I'm going to buy Honey Bunches of Oats. That's like a
Mhm.
little bit healthier. It sounds healthier. It has
Mhm.
oats, it has almonds. And you find out that there's chemicals in there that are banned in other countries. They don't even sell that cereal in
Right.
other countries, but we sell it here. Like,
Right.
what are we doing? That shit is so frustrating to me, that we can't have a little semblance of common sense when it comes to what we give our people to eat. That leads to sickness, it leads to disease. I just don't think we're the smartest country, and I don't think we're the healthiest country. And that's unfortunate, man. I don't see why we can't be one of the healthiest and one of the most educated countries in the world. And we're not. People might not like to hear it, but we're not. And it's sad to me.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
this Food Safety Act, it's interesting to me because some of the foods that have these chemicals in them are very popular foods that we've heard of, right? So Skittles, hot tamales, double bubble gum, which, man, I was just chomping on some the other day, those little wrap
Mhm.
packs, those
Yep.
little hot Cheetos, uh, anything with the red dye in it. So there's all these things that have been known to cause cancer or to cause disease. I'm just going to read from this. California, it says, is the first state to ban 4 food additives for cancer and other health risks. So the 4 food additives they're talking about are uh, brominated vegetable oil, potassium bromate, something called proparaben, and red dye 3. Um, those are all ingredients that are found in candy, cookies. The ban's going to start in 2027. I mean, it's 2023. So I don't know
Right.
why you give a 4-year runway. It's like someone's embezzling money and you're like, okay, stop embezzling money. We'll give you 5 more years to take as much as you want. Like, I don't,
Yeah, good point. That's a good way to put it.
that's
Yeah.
frustrating. It's
Yeah.
frustrating. What are your thoughts on that, man? What are we doing?
Yeah, it's scary. It starts with education, and it starts with, if we can get to the point where it's starting earlier with our schools and educating properly on nutrition as young, not just the old food pyramid, but we're talking about what's actually in the products, and getting the kids starting to think that it's got to be not just the kids, but it's got to be the families understanding, to keep that crap out. We always say control what you can control and don't worry about the rest, right? Talking
Sure.
about when we're talking about recovery and stuff like that. Well, you 100% have control over what you put in your mouth, right? Because
Right.
your hand is feeding it for the most part, right?
Yeah.
We know. So, but the thing is, if you don't know, you don't know. So if you assume, like most people do, that whatever's in there on the shelves is fine for you because you're trusting in it, then you're going to feel like it's okay to put it, in your
Right.
mouth. But we got to really educate, on that. But general rule, if it's in a bag, box, or a can, it's probably got chemicals in it to preserve it. So
Right.
right there, if you want to start on anything, just start avoiding things in a bag, box, or can for majority of the time. It's almost impossible in today's world to not do that, but to avoid all that stuff. But if you can start with 50% of the time,
Sure.
30%, 20% of the time. If you take, out of your meals of the day, work on the one meal at a time and look at your hand. Is it from a bag, box, or can? And make the decision right there. If you're not in a rush, then go to the fridge and get something healthier. If you're in a rush and you're in the car or going from place to place and you need something quick, make the best choice you can. But each meal, start with just those, no bag, box, or can, and you should be doing better.
I like that. I haven't heard that before, but you're right. All those things are processed, right? So
Yeah. So just on that, not even talking about the coloring and stuff,
sure.
just based on we need a chemical to make this last on the shelf.
Yeah.
So just like if we want to put a when we were doing cadavers, it kind of gross, right? But they were in formaldehyde to make them
Yep.
last longer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in my mind, well, there's got to be a food equivalent to formaldehyde in this in this bag, box, or can to make this food sustain on the shelf, right? So
The other thing with that is it's sometimes it's cost prohibitive. Look,
yeah,
I've had hard times in my life where, I was financially strapped. And so there was times where I was having, dollar tacos for meals
yep,
because I couldn't afford anything else. And I know there's people that have been in that same position. I thought of it this weekend. I went to the grocery store literally to get a couple lemons and I grabbed those, but I also picked up 4 peaches and 1 cantaloupe. I'm a farmer, bro. We grow that stuff all the time.
yeah,
It's like I think of that as being like almost for free. And
yeah,
I walked out of there $14.
yeah,
Cantaloupe, 4 peaches, 2 lemons. And I
yeah,
wasn't like at Erewhon or,
yeah.
some specialty grocery store. I was at Ralph's or Vaughn's or whatever the
Sure.
local spot is. And so it's just
It's,
frustrating to me that the cheapest foods
yeah,
seem to be the
everything.
most expensive and the most unhealthy.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm glad that California passed this law. I hope other states follow suit.
yeah. Me too, man.
Reason that we need to be putting food out there that we know is detrimental to your health.
Yeah.
You
It's like, why are we even having this conversation? Like, why did it even have to come to a vote? Why didn't one person just say, okay, you know, but I
Yes,
know how it all works, but it's just, come on. Like, what's even the argument? And I, anytime we do any of these things, I try to look up pros and cons and, you know,
it's like what's the debate here, right?
yeah, what's the debate here? And I know it's there, a lot of them are worried about, okay, well, if you eliminate this one, then you're going to have to eliminate from these things like they eliminated it from cosmetics before they eliminated it from food, right? And why did they
1990.
and yeah. So, and it's one of those things, it's like they did that because the skin's the biggest organ in our body and it absorbs everything. So
Mhm.
we don't want it going into our system from the skin. Well, you're putting it directly into your mouth, going right in. I mean, what do they think's going to happen once it hits the? So it's just ridiculous, just like so many other things. But I'm telling you, like, and traveling internationally and other places, the fruits, the vegetables, the food itself looks totally different. Like over here, our apples are huge, right? The apples should not be. You're a farmer,
Right.
when it
Yeah.
comes, they should not be that big and that
Yeah.
shiny and that, bananas is the same thing. Bananas should not be as big as our bundles are. They're
Yeah.
tiny and they taste way better. Tomatoes, the same thing. Like it's just ridiculous. So
Yeah. The food thing is really a scary thing. The last thing I'll say on that is I hate that most of those additives are in foods that are kind of geared towards kids. Cereal, candy, cookies, fruit juices.
yeah,
That's setting a child up for a life of disease.
yeah, yeah.
So,
It's really
um,
sad. It's almost the kids, they don't stand a chance, right? You
yeah,
start, because then you're rewriting DNA too. We won't even get into the genetics part, but
sure.
generation after generation, that's why we're seeing heavier and heavier kids from early on. There's no way a kid should be that heavy coming out of the,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And as a child, I'm not a parent yet, but as a parent, you have control, a little more control about what goes in your kid's mouth. And, if you're a kid and you've been having hot Cheetos and Cokes a few times a week, you're going to crave that. And
right.
so as a parent, if you know better, maybe you can eliminate that or maybe be the example. If your kids don't see you having that, then maybe they won't want it either. So,
Well, that's what I was saying. It really starts with the parents, and it's so much easier said than done. Me and Leanne's got her master's in nutrition. I got a degree in nutrition. Biochemistry is a huge part. So we had our kids, and we're like, oh, they're gonna be. But when the heat of the battle comes, and you're going from field to field or whatever, you're throwing out a bag of goldfish. That was their standard for so long, and both of us got to the point where we're like, you know what? Like we wouldn't eat that goldfish. What are we doing? But it
yeah.
was easy, right? So then we start, but at the, like you said, to your point, that was way cheaper than going to the organic little puffs or whatever that
Yeah.
were also healthy. and we were at the phase where it's like, okay, well, we gotta save some money here and here. What? Why? But then we'd come full circle. Why are we sacrificing our kids the money? Let's sacrifice on other things, right? So it's this constant battle, and we up and down with how we've done things too. It's not a perfect thing, but that's why we got to the point where let's just take it one thing at a time, one moment at a time, and do our best, right?
Do your best.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things boil down to that. Just do your best. And some days your best might be 80% of your best on another day.
Yeah.
I was telling somebody that I care about yesterday, don't beat yourself up. You're doing your best,
Yeah.
And his response was, man, that's kind of easy for you to say. And I said, nah, dude, it's that's really how I feel. Like there's days where my best isn't my 100%, and I could beat myself up over that, but I know all the extenuating circumstances that made my best today 85% and not 100%.
Right.
And you got to live with that and try to do better the next day,
Yep. Yeah.
So anyways, we'll follow this. I think 2027's a long runway for this bill to go into effect, and who knows what other bills might come in the meantime, but it's a starting point, right?
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that. Hopefully, this will be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, any other last thoughts you have, Dustin, before we go?
No, just let's have a good rest of the week. It's hump day today. Let's finish strong and get back at it next week. I think next week will be a good podcast. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having a good interview. I'm going to ask you two quick questions before we go. Tomorrow we have the Chiefs and the Broncos, Thursday night football. Any predictions there?
Yeah, Broncos are going to take it. It'd be a big upset. Like I said, Russell Wilson's going to, turn things around. This is
Love
his
it.
game.
Love
Yeah,
it.
so that's what I'm rooting for. I have
Okay.
no statistical proof of that, but
Yeah.
that's what my heart says and my gut wants. So
Okay. Yeah, good. Well, yeah, maybe Kelce coming off a sore ankle, and the Chiefs have dodged a few bullets, so we'll see that. And
yeah.
then Monday night football, Chargers and Cowboys. What are your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I want Chargers. Yeah, I want to, like you said, they're coming off that bye, right?
Yeah.
So I think they're going to have fresh legs, fresh mind, and have a different mindset and come get it Monday night, right?
Yeah,
So
Monday night, whole country's watching. We're trying to be 3-2, get over that 500 hump, and the Cowboys coming off a smacking from the Niners. Maybe they're a little bit beat up, licking their wounds. So I'm curious to see how that pans out. Should be a good week. Yeah, man, wishing you well. I appreciate the minutes and the conversation, and
yeah,
I'm actually gonna hit you up. Probably I'm working a little late tonight, but maybe tomorrow because I want to talk to you about a patient case that I'd like to get your opinion on.
okay. Vice versa. Remind me, I have one for you too. That's I'm meeting with it tomorrow, so be
Nice.
interesting.
Okay, yeah, I'll hit you up on a break then, Mignana.
Sounds good.
To all our listeners, we appreciate you. Share this with any friends if you found this interesting. As I always say, we're trying to grow our audience, trying to educate and entertain at the same time. We do appreciate you. Dustin, I appreciate you too. Thanks for the time on this
Too.
early morning. I know you got a long day, but I love to get it started off on the right foot. I'm energized and looking forward to having a good day.
Yeah, me too. You too, P. Thanks for making the time, and let's have a good one, huh? I like the
Okay.
yellow, by the way, man. It's a
Thanks.
sunny morning. I like it. Looking good,
Yeah,
man.
had to bring a little energy, right? So
Yeah. Good.
good, man. Well, have a good week. Have a good day. We'll chat soon. To our listeners, we appreciate you. Thanks for the comments and the suggestions. We do read them, and we'll be back with you here in a few weeks. Let's have a safe week of games, and man, we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Peace
All
out.
right, guys. Have a good day, a good week. We'll be with you back in a few days.